Well, he's best known as a climate change blogger, actually called the web's most influential climate change blogger by Time magazine. You can read it daily at climateprogress.org. This is a project of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, where Joe Romm is a senior fellow. He's also a former DOE Assistant Secretary of Energy and a book author, too. His latest book, just out, is called Straight Up. America's fiercest climate blogger takes on the status quo, media, politicians, and clean energy solutions. Joe Romm, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. I want to talk a lot about your book, but I just want to get your take now on this decision on Cape Wind, the first offshore wind farm for this country. What is your sense of what this does for the offshore wind as far as its future in the energy mix here?
Well, offshore wind, is potentially a big deal because it's closer to where people are. We have vast amounts of wind in the Midwest, but it's kind of far from the coast where a lot of people are. So potentially it's a very big deal. There's a huge wind resource up and down the East Coast and also the West Coast. And other countries are, as you know, aggressively pursuing it. So I think it's a pretty big deal.
This one took 9 years to get approval. Of course, a lot of controversy involved there. But now that this decision has been made, do you see that process shortening now that this one has gone through?
Well, this was going to be the toughest, I guess. There are a lot of other states from Maine down, the East Coast that want these. So I'm hopeful that this will free things up. I think it shows the Obama administration is committed to opening up resources everywhere.
Right. Okay, let's get to this book because you are taking on the status quo, media, politicians, and others. Tell me where you think the general media go wrong here.
Well, I think one way the media goes wrong is they sort of give equal time to views that are not equally balanced. The overwhelming majority of the scientific community understands that the planet has been warming up and that humans are the main cause. And frankly, there are a small number of fringe, people out there, from my perspective, who disagree. But oftentimes in the media, you see a he said, she said that gives both views equal balance to the public.
They make it 50-50 when you think it should be what?
99-1.
Okay, Joe. But you also say that the media coverage is not likely to improve from here.
Well, that's because, I think you know as well as any, the mainstream media is shedding reporters. And particularly in the specialties, I think the first place to go is the science reporters, the environmental reporters. So we've lost a lot of expertise in the media that could, I think, explain the issue much better. And I think the scientific community is kind of left with nobody to talk to almost. And you
focus a lot on the science now more and more in your blog, but you also say the poor coverage is due in part to the IPCC's own naivete regarding the media, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Is that improving in the wake of ClimateGate and the pummeling that this organization has taken?
Yeah, well, as you know, in the book, Straight Up, I have a lot of examples of scientists are not the greatest communicators, so it gets compounded with the media. I think scientists, for instance, don't spend a lot of time explaining stuff that they think they've explained, like world's warming, humans are the main cause. They talk, what's more interesting to them is the same as with the news media. What's out at the fringe discussions? What's at the edges of the scientific debate? And so it seems like there's more debate, whereas on the core issues, there's not a lot of debate at all. So I think the good news is the scientific community is thinking very hard about how to get its message out, frankly, directly. And in my case, that's why I started, Climate Progress, because I thought communicate directly, and the audience has been growing. So I think there is a great hunger out there for unvarnished facts.
Is there not enough of what's the danger, what's at risk here? You say it is time for the bluntest talk on this right now. Give us the bluntest talk.
Well, what I think hasn't been expressed clearly is that if we keep doing nothing, just pouring out tens of billions of tons of heat-trapping gases, then we are going to remake this country and the world. We are risking 9 degrees, 10 degrees Fahrenheit warming by the end of the century, sea level rise of 5 feet or more potentially just this century, turning the Southwest from Kansas and Oklahoma to Southern California into a permanent dust bowl. These are things that we risk in the scientific literature, and we can solve it. The other key point is I worked at the Department of Energy for 5 years, so I know that we have the clean energy solutions, and I try to lay that out too. on the blog.
So why such a debate then at this time if the evidence is so overwhelming? I mean, you say the deniers seem to have a stronger voice right now.
Well, you know, the big oil, they're very well funded. They've adopted the tobacco industry tactics of sort of creating what I would consider to be a lot of phony experts and then publicizing it and taking out ads. So yeah, they have continued unabated, and I think the scientific community has, you know, kind of faltered on the messaging somewhat. I also think, to be honest, that a lot of people in the environmental community have been a bit reluctant to talk about global warming because they're concerned that it sort of will depress people to know the truth. And from my perspective, as long as you state clearly what the facts are and that there's a clear-cut solution, I just think people want to hear that.
What do you think is different about your blog that it has gained such a following? Where do you get your energy and climate information?
Well, I think I come from both worlds. I have scientific training, of a strong clean energy background, but my father was a newspaper editor. Both my parents were journalists, so I have that, you know, let's try to explain things in simple language background. So I think that's part of it. I think that people want the unvarnished facts. I think people want to hear about clean energy. There's a lot about clean energy that isn't, frankly, sexy enough for the mainstream media, like energy efficiency. I think that there's a lot of, what I try to do is just cover everything, sort of be the one-stop place that you can become informed on this subject.